Welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper, brought to you by California Unearthed. In this episode, we're going to dive back into urban legends and folklore of California. And Cheryl actually brought this one to us. She was looking on TikTok and sent me a video on what was called the Ojai Vampire. And the funny thing about that was my cousin Eric, about an hour later, sent me the exact same video.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, so I had to do this podcast. And I thought to myself, Ojai, where is Ojai, California? I've never heard of that. Ojai. And I'd never heard of Ojai. It was really odd. And I was like, where the heck is that? So Ojai, California is a picturesque city in the Ojai Valley of Ventura County. And Ventura County is just north of Los Angeles on the coast, if you don't know where that's at. It is northwest of Los Angeles, east of Santa Barbara, and is about 15 miles from Ventura. And the valley itself is about 10 miles long and about 3 miles wide, and is divided into a lower and upper valley, and is surrounded by hills and mountains.
Sounds pretty.
The coastal area around the Santa Barbara, Ventura area is absolutely beautiful. I've actually taken you there when we went and visited my Uncle Les.
Oh, yes. I remember that. It was beautiful there.
Right. And so the highway that goes between I-5 and Ventura, and I can't think of the highway number off the top of my head right now, but it is just north of Magic Mountain on I-5. It's that highway just north of Magic Mountain.
Okay.
And then you take that into Ventura. That is absolutely a beautiful drive into Ventura. There's a lot of family farms. Ranch land is beautiful. So Ojai's population as of 2020 is only 7,637 people.
Wow. I thought it'd be bigger than that.
No, it is a very, very small town. Before I get a little bit into the history of Ojai, I want to give you some fun facts about it that I found out. All right, you ready for this one?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Ojai, California is the home of the $6 Million Man and Jamie Summers.
Really?
Bionic Man and the Bionic Woman lived in Ojai, California.
Really? Okay. That's interesting.
And yes, they did film up there in Ojai.
That's how I was wondering. Did they film there?
Yes, they did. Very specifically, I believe it was Return of the Bionic Woman.
Okay.
Was filmed there. Now, that's not the only film or show that was filmed in Ojai. There has been actually over 100 films and TV shows filmed in Ojai.
Wow.
The most prominent ones is a movie called Easy A. Have you ever heard of that one?
No, I have not.
I've actually seen that one. It's a good movie. Easy A was filmed at the high school and all the surrounding downtown areas of Ojai. So if you want to know what Ojai looks like, watch that movie.
Okay.
Because there's a ton of filming locations there from that movie. Now here's the other shocker. There are some scenes filmed in Ojai from Smokey and the Bandit.
Really?
Oh yeah, I thought that was kind of cool. So there's some fun facts at least. And there's, like I said, there's a ton others we're not going to get into, but those were the most prominent ones that I could see. So Ojai is known for its vineyards, its breweries, its boutiques, its art galleries, hotels, recreational activities, as in hiking and camping, and definitely its farms. It's farmland, ranch land, and the local markets is organic agriculture.
Okay.
It has small businesses specializing in local and ecological friendly art, design, and home improvement.
Okay.
There is even a city ordinance that prohibits big box stores from coming in.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then that way, they can focus on the small business and retaining the small town atmosphere and character.
That's pretty cool.
I think it is. So you won't find a box store in Ojai, California.
No Costco?
No Costco. Like I said, you're 15 minutes away from Ventura.
Right.
So, you can go there. Now, the town of Ojai, if you look at it, is made up of the Spanish architecture. So that makes sense because the Spanish in the 1700s began to colonize the area and bring in the missions and all of that we all know.
And that Spanish architecture and all of
Right. That all fits right into that. But you're probably wondering, where does the word Ojai come from?
Right. Yeah, I'm wondering
That's kind of an odd name.
Which to me it almost sounds Indian.
It is.
Okay.
You hit the nail on the head right there. Ojai is derived from the Mexican era for Rancho Ojai, which in turn took its name from, and I'm gonna butcher this, I know it, it's the Venturno Shumash word for the nest, or meaning the moon.
Oh, okay.
So it was the Shumash natives was where that word came from originally. So the Shumash Indians were the first to inhabit the Ojai Valley. They were a coastal people who inhabited the central and southern coastal regions. So they ranged from Morro Bay in the north to Malibu in the south, along with the Channel Islands.
Oh, wow.
So they had a large area of land. There was at least 10,000 Shumash people living in over 150 individual villages, speaking variations of the same language. So like I was saying earlier, starting in 1769, or in that time frame, the Spanish soldiers and missionaries began to arrive and colonize California and along the coastline. They didn't do too much of the interior of California. They stayed along the coastline. That's why all 21 missions are kind of along the coast of California.
Okay. I didn't really realize that until you brought it up.
Yeah. They didn't go into the interior very often. They just kind of stuck to the coast. So what they were doing, they were Christianizing the native people.
Right.
And we all kind of know that story as well. So the Spanish were forming military presidios, and they were relocating the Shumash people from their native villages into the Spanish missions.
Okay.
And as we all know, due to the violence and the importation of disease from the Spanish, the Shumash people were beginning to die off in a devastating rate under the Spanish rule.
Wow.
According to George Tinker, who is a native scholar, the central native population was reduced by some 90% during a 70-year period under the Spanish rule. The U.S. then stepped in 1846, and by 1900, the Shumash population declined to just 200. But currently today, the Shumash population is now back on the rise. It is ranging from 2,000 to 5,000 native people. That is a good sign.
Yeah, that they weren't completely wiped out.
Right, exactly. A lot of the tribes here in California were completely wiped out by the Spanish and U.S. rule.
Right.
So let's then talk about Spanish rule is the Rancho Ojai. In 1837, Fernando Tico, a Santa Barbara businessman, received the 17,716-acre Rancho Ojai Mexican land grant, which included both the lower and upper Ojai Valley. Tico operated a cattle ranch on the land and moved his large family to the adobe in the lower valley. Tico sold the entire Rancho Ojai in 1853. The rancho changed hands multiple times before it was finally purchased in 1864 by Thomas A. Scott, a Pennsylvania oil and railroad tycoon.
Yeah, he would have had the money.
The petroleum exploration of the Ojai Valley was a result of a report of oil springs along the mountains. In 1866, Scott's nephew, Thomas Bard, B-A-R-D, used a steam-powered cable tool drilling rig on the north side of Sulphur Mountain. On May 29, 1867, Ojai No. 6 produced an oil gusher.
Wow.
At a depth of 550 feet, and the Ojai field eventually produced 10 to 20 barrels of oil a day.
Wow.
Also in 1866, Leland Stanford's brother, Joseph, Leland Stanford always has to have his hand in stuff.
Yep, of course.
But his brother, this time, Joseph, dug oil tunnels on the south side of Sulphur Mountain, producing 20 barrels a day for the Stanford Brother Refinery in San Francisco. Like I said, Leland Stanford always has to have his hands in everything. For economic reasons, falling oil prices at the end of the Civil War and cheaper imports from the East, Scott and Stanford ceased oil exploration in the Ojai Valley. And that's usually what happens when prices start going down. They
Right.
pull up stakes and say, we're out of here.
Right.
Thomas Bard then began selling the surface rights to the parcels of Rancho Ojai in late 1867. As the president of Unocal, you know who that is?
No.
Unocal.
Well, I've heard Unical.
I'm pretty sure I'm correct. Unocal is like Union 76 gas stations. I believe that's who they are. That name is very familiar to me. Bard would return in 1890s to dig about 50 oil tunnels in the Sulphur Mountain, which produced until 1998.
Wow.
So oil production here in the United States obviously is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go on to Nordhoff. Okay, so the town was laid out in 1874 by San Buenaventura businessman R.G. Sturtum and named Nordhoff in honor of the writer Charles Nordhoff, who had written a book about California titled California for Health, Pleasure and Residence, a book for travelers and settlers.
Huh.
When I first hear that, I'm thinking of the Kellogg's and how the Kellogg's started their health kick. And they had like a club that they had people come to get healthy and live a healthy life. And that's how Corn Flakes ends up being invented, was by the Kellogg's.
Okay.
And so when I hear that title for that book, just about this era, I think, is when the Kellogg's were kind of doing the same thing. It was a big health kick in that at that time.
Right.
So most early settlers to the valley had one or more family members who were ill, particularly with respiratory illnesses, and the Ojai Valley developed a reputation for having healthy air.
Okay.
And I believe that would be possible because they were near the coast.
Right.
So they're only 15 miles from the coast, so the sea air is going to be a lot healthier. So many did get well after moving into the valley, and Charles Nordhoff had not ever even visited the Ojai Valley when his book came out in 1873. So the guy just named the town after this guy. But he did make several visits to his namesake town after it was named after him in the early 1880s. And he did mention the Ojai Valley in his revised 1882 version of his book.
Okay.
So along with that healthy environment, there were hot springs that were discovered in the area. And so then a hot springs resort was created in the late 1800s.
Which that was a big craze back then too.
Exactly. In 1917, the name of the town was changed to Ojai. And that was because almost the entire town was burned to the ground because of a fire that flew through town in 1917.
Wow.
And a gentleman by the name of Edward D. Libby financed the reconstruction of the town that you see today.
Wow.
So the bell tower, the Spanish architecture, everything you see today is because of Libby. And so they renamed it at that point. When he rebuilt the town, they then named it Ojai.
Okay.
So now we come to the part of the podcast for why we are here and the video that you sent me.
I was wondering when we were going to get to that.
Yes. So the part of the podcast that Cheryl's been waiting for is the ghosts and spirits. And Ojai is known as the most haunted city in Southern California.
Huh. The most haunted.
The most haunted city in Southern California. Yep. And there's quite a few reasons why. We're going to go through quite a few of them. And I'm going to save the best two for last.
Okay.
So you guys have to hang on to hear all the other ones. And they're pretty short, so they're going to go quickly. So there are three main places where a lot of these hauntings are happening. The hotel, the roads, and a place called Camp Comfort Park. That's Camp Comfort, not Camp Crystal Lake.
That's going through my mind. Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Now, when I was researching all this stuff, there is quite a few different versions of two of these stories, the two big stories we're going to talk about. There's a few different versions, and so they're pretty close. We're going to talk about them. So when I was researching all of these hauntings that were happening in Ojai, there's quite a few different versions of the last two stories.
Okay.
And there's quite a few other stories. And I was going from video to video, from website to website, and I kept getting all these different stories that were going on around Ojai and Ojai Valley.
Okay.
And so I found a really cool website. It's called Weird California. And you can look it up on Google. And Weird California probably had the best description of a lot of these stories. They didn't have every story, but they had a pretty good description of a lot of these stories. And so I got most of these from there, not all of them, but most of them. And so if you want to go check out Weird California, I would definitely do it. I'll put a link in the show notes for their website. And this is not the first time I've actually been to their website. I've used their website before for our video ideas. All right, so the Ojai Valley Inn. That was opened in 1923.
Okay.
So you definitely know there's going to be some sort of hauntings going on in there. So there is a ghost who supposedly resides in room 5 of the hotel. Guests have been known to hear somebody knocking at the closet door from the inside.
Interesting.
So when the closet door is opened, they obviously find the room empty, but there's a foul odor that was not there before.
Oh.
So this ghost is leaving a foul odor.
Is he stinky?
Apparently.
He needs to take a shower.
Well, we don't know if it's a he. Could be a she.
That could be a she, yeah.
He or she. So he or she resides in room number 5 there at the hotel. So if you're in for a haunting experience, you want to stay at the Ojai Hotel, request to stay in room 5.
With the stinky ghost.
Yeah. And then obviously, where are you going to have the most hauntings of anywhere? A cemetery.
Cemetery.
Yes.
Go
So
figure.
the Nordhoff Cemetery was established in 1870, and that cemetery has a ghost, actually a phantom, I guess you want to call it phantom or a ghost, and it is a black dog.
Oh, okay.
So many people have been said to see a black dog roaming the cemetery. So many people have seen him running around at night and have heard his howls and growls. So they haven't just seen him, they've heard him.
They've heard him. Okay.
And so as we're going on with these other hauntings, remember this black dog
Okay.
at the cemetery. He's going to come up again.
Okay.
Now, I mentioned a road. There's a road in Ojai Valley called Creek Road. It's the oldest road in the valley. And this is the most haunted road. There's a lot of these hauntings we're going to talk about that happen on Creek Road. Even our 2 big ones happen here on Creek Road. So this is a very, very active road. So long ago, Creek Road was the only way to get to Ojai. It was a stagecoach route, a horse trail, and before that, the native people used it as a trail.
Okay.
So this road has been around for a long time. So there's been obviously lots of accidents on this road. And around the turn of the century, a stagecoach tried to forge the San Antonio Creek, and the water caught them. The stage was swept away, and several children lost their lives.
Wow.
Now their ghosts are known to haunt the fabled road and the bridge going over San Antonio Creek.
Oh, okay.
That bridge is going to come up again. Our next story is of a headless horseman.
But we're not in Sleepy Hollow.
No, we're not in Sleepy Hollow. But every town or every area has some sort of headless horseman. This headless horseman happens again on Creek Road and dates back to the 1880s. And it might reflect on a true event.
Okay.
So it involves a bandit who was gunned down by lawmen and buried beneath an oak tree on the grounds Villanova Preparatory School. So they buried him under an oak tree on the grounds of a preparatory school. So in hopes of collecting the bounty on this guy, the lawmen cut off his head to prove that it was him. Yep, exactly. And so in doing so, this bandit, while in hell, Satan offered this bandit to go back to the living and get his head back. And when he came back, he couldn't find his head because the lawmen had taken it. And so he went back down to the devil and made a new deal that he would take the devil's black horse and ride along the valley, picking up sinners' souls.
Oh.
So if you're a sinner, watch out. The headless horseman
may come and get you.
Is coming for you. And it's said that he gets back to his grave before sunup. So he has been seen along Creek Road by individuals, a headless horseman. But that's not the only headless story that we have here. Another headless story is about a motorcyclist. So one night, a biker was riding down the hill on Creek Road and was hit by a pickup truck. He either flew off of the bike and was beheaded by a tree limb or a metal fence. They're not quite sure. Or they think that there was a piece of metal sticking out of the truck that beheaded him, leaving his body on the bike and the bike continuing on.
Oh, jeez.
Not only that, there was a gentleman that was driving by who witnessed the entire event.
Wow.
And was so traumatized he had a heart attack and died himself.
Oh, jeez.
I could actually see all of that happening.
Yeah, I can too.
I haven't found any records to verify it, but definitely can see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get into ghostly women.
Okay.
There's a few different ghostly women going on Creek Road as well. So the first one is back when Creek Road Bridge was a trestle bridge. A woman distraught because her husband was never home. She hung herself beneath the bridge. And so today they say that if you go to the Creek Road Bridge at night, you'll find a cold spot where she died.
Huh.
Now, I believe on that same bridge, 2 children are seen in 19th century clothing walking along the bridge, and all of a sudden, they just jump over the edge. And so when you run to check on these children and look over the railing, nobody's there.
Right,
There's nothing there. And to be into 19th century clothing,
yeah.
you're thinking something's odd there. So another child story, there's a ghostly school bus, which as local legend would have it, went off the bridge in the 30s or 40s. 12 children and the bus driver all died in the accident.
Jeez.
The legend goes on to say that if you visit the bridge on rainy nights, you can hear the screams of the children.
That would be eerie to hear.
Oh yeah. And there's also, and this next story may go in line with the one I just told about the school bus and the children. Along that same bridge, there's a dismembered hand that has been seen rubbing the railing of the bridge.
Huh.
And it is said to be a hand of a child.
Interesting.
So I can see how that could be possibly one of the children from the school bus accident.
Right.
All right, so I said earlier, women. The second woman that we have is the hitchhiking woman in a bloody wedding dress.
Ah.
So the story goes on this one that a woman on her wedding day was murdered by her husband for her dowry.
Oh, jeez.
She is now seen walking along the road in a blood-soaked wedding dress.
Huh.
And many people have seen her.
Really?
Many people have come across her. And then there is a third woman who we're going to talk about. This woman was riding a horse in the area, and the horse was spooked by a snake, threw the woman off, and when she fell, she ended up passing away, dying from her injuries. She is now seen reenacting her death along the roadside.
Like falling off the horse?
Falling off the horse, yep. Much like the woman in the bloody wedding dress, a lot of these ghosts are reenacting their deaths.
Right.
Now, this so much isn't a ghost incident, is a monster.
Okay.
And this one's a little iffy because you'll understand when I read this. It happens once again on Creek Road. Very popular road this is. So a giant bat with a 20-foot wingspan once terrified a woman during a drive home. She was sleepy and it had been a long day, and this was a bat with red eyes that swooped up and over her car. Now that one, I can see delusions from being tired.
Right.
And possibly not sleeping well, because I actually have had visions because I hadn't slept in over 24 hours.
Right.
When I was driving quite a few times. It wasn't a bat with red eyes and 20-foot wingspan.
Right.
So I've seen people running across the freeway who weren't there. I've seen a yellow bulldozer at the end of a off-ramp that wasn't there. I've seen all sorts of things because of the lack of sleep, and I was tired. So that story itself, we can chalk that up to
Just being tired.
Her being tired, really. Because she's the only one, I think, that's ever reported a large bat
Right.
in the area.
With red eyes.
Red eyes. So here we go. This is the first of the two legend stories that are very, very, very popular in Ojai.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of the Ojai Char Man?
No.
All right. This story has about 20 different versions to it.
Okay.
Obviously, this legend started at some point, and you know how people get. It's like the telephone game.
Yeah.
One story turns into another story, what turns into, a whole different story.
Right.
And that's what happened here.
Okay.
You make up your mind what you think the real story is here.
Okay.
All right, so near the bridge we've been talking about, possibly the bridge we've been talking about, I don't know for sure, is the ghost or monster of the Char Man. We're not quite sure. The Char Man is a hideous figure who's beyond recognition, who emerges out of the forest and attacks motorists, especially if you get out of your car and yell, "Help me! Help me!" He will run out of the woods and attack you. Now you laugh, but that'll make sense here in a moment. So this legend is so popular in Ojai that the bridge has been renamed Char Man Bridge.
Huh.
So that's how popular this story is. So I'm going to give you 3 different versions of this story. They're yet similar, but a hair different.
Okay.
So the first and second are fairly alike. So we'll talk about this first one. It occurred in the fire of 1848, and there was a fire in 1848. I double checked on that. It was a father and son are caught in the fire of 1848. Both are horribly burned beyond recognition. The father sadly passes away before help arrives, and the son, meaning well, goes insane because of his injuries.
Right.
And the fact that his father just died in front of him. So by the time rescue workers arrived, the son had skinned the father of all of his burnt flesh and hung his father from a nearby tree. The son, of course, eventually escapes into the woods and becomes the Char Man.
Huh.
So here's the second story. This one, like I said, is similar to the first, but this one is a husband and wife, not a father and son. So the husband and wife are caught in the fire. The husband is horribly burned and injured, and the wife is caught in the blaze, more than likely caught in the house, yelling, help me," over and over again. The husband, due to his injuries, can't help her,
Right.
and she ends up perishing. Could you imagine? It's just horrible that he's not able to help her. So the husband eventually becomes the Char Man.
Okay.
Now, that story makes a little more sense with the help me.
Right.
If you stop on the bridge at night and cry it out,
Yeah.
the husband then comes out of the woods and attacks you because he's thinking that he couldn't help his wife, and so he's angry.
Mm-hmm.
So supposedly, the Ventura County Historical Museum, claims that there were nobody injured in the 1948 fire.
Okay.
So the origins of that story, who knows?
Right.
Maybe there was somebody injured that just never got reported. You don't know.
That's true.
But there's yet another similar version floating around saying that the Char Man was a firefighter who lost his life. But once again, the museum says that no one lost their life during that fire, so...
Yeah.
So the third version I was referring to, not the firefighter, but this third version, this one takes place in the early 1950s. So this one's about a horrible automobile fire. It was an accident that actually happened on Char Man Bridge. It wasn't Char Man Bridge at the time, obviously.
Right.
So this one in which the driver is horribly burned beyond recognition, but manages to get out of the vehicle and barely survive it. He escapes into the nearby woods to become the Char Man. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
What one of those 3 do you think could be?
Be any of them? I don't know. I mean,
The husband and wife one makes sense.
yeah.
But then the father and son one also. But there's yet another version of this story. And this comes from the police officers who claim that in the 60s, there's supposedly an elderly man who had a very bad case of skin cancer. His face and body were deformed very badly. He would only come out at night and walk his dog in the evening because he didn't want anybody to see him and how deformed he was.
Right.
So walking the dog in the evening, he was then spotted by some of the local youth. You know what youths can do when they see somebody with deformities. They're like dogs on a bone.
Right.
And so they go back and tell the story of a Char Man because the skin cancer looked like he was burned. He was unrecognizable. And so he then would be the Char Man. That story makes more sense than any of the other ones.
I would have to agree with that.
So the guy with the horrible skin cancer and the youths seeing him, not knowing what was wrong with him, then come up with this elaborate story.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So this is where it kind of gets a little cool about the Char Man. So the Char Man is such a legend in local folklore that there's even a hot sauce named after him. It was created by Chris Sutton and is called Char Man's Revenge. It's habanero peppers that are in the hot sauce. And it's by Highway 33 Foods. And you can get this hot sauce in Ojai. I'm sure you can get it online as well.
Yeah.
So it has a tagline, just beware, with 5 fire-roasted habanero peppers in every bottle.
Wow.
Char Man's Revenge may become a reality. All right, so we're here. We're at the point that Cheryl has been waiting for. The reason why this podcast exists. And why is that, Cheryl?
Vampires.
Vampires, yes. Ojai has a vampire problem. This vampire problem takes place where? At Camp Comfort. This is not Jason Voorhees.
No.
About 1880, a man from either Italy or Spain arrives in Ojai. He acquires a small ranch and keeps to himself. However, as soon as he arrives, local cattle begin disappearing, but being found dead and drained of blood. Certain individuals also end up disappearing as well. So then, shortly after, locals were then assaulted by strange wolf-like animals, like dogs, basically. They could have been coyotes or...
Right.
You know, I'm not sure if wolves were extinct by that point. There could be wolves.
Possibly.
So the townspeople began to worry and get scared, which is not a good combination.
Right.
So they believed a vampire was amongst them. Since this all started with the new arrival of the stranger from Europe.
Right.
And the fact that this man's appearance was said to be of a rotten corpse. He must be a vampire. So the townspeople decided in their ultimate wisdom to raid the vampire's ranch during the day. But the vampire was obviously prepared for this. He'd been through it a few times.
Probably.
And so that when they arrived, a huge black phantom dog greeted the strangers, growled, and tried to attack them. They claimed that this dog also drank blood as well.
He was a hound of hell.
He was a hellhound, yes. So the ranchers eventually repelled the dog with a silver crucifix. And the dog was a little tougher than they would imagine. The silver crucifix wasn't quite enough until they got the holy water out. And the holy water seemed to do it. And so they were able to corral the dog so that they could get to the vampire. So once they closed in on the vampire, he was in a above ground stone sarcophagus.
Okay, which is kind of odd, but...
It's very odd, yes,
because
exactly.
it's on his home property, it's not in a cemetery.
Right, right. But this stone sarcophagus was hidden in the underbrush and weeds. So he was hiding himself.
He was.
At that point, who sleeps in a sarcophagus?
Right, during the day.
During the day. Like I said, now the dog's taken care of. They found the sarcophagus. They open it up and they find the European stranger inside sleeping. What do you think they do?
They're gonna put a stake in his heart.
Exactly. They stake the vampire. Then they seal the sarcophagus back up, and they're done. They have done their duty.
I wanted some more torches and pitchforks. But it was during the day, so I guess they wouldn't have the torches.
That stone sarcophagus is said to still exist.
Really?
And it's said to still be there. It's hidden away amongst the brush and the weeds.
Huh.
Now you gotta remember, it's an above ground sarcophagus with a small window in it, so you supposedly can peer into and see the skeleton of the vampire.
I was going to say there should still be a skeleton there.
Right, and so you can peer in and see him. So it's said that this legend has been cropped up by a factual above ground tomb. Now, that's not unusual. Really. And I know you said earlier that it's the middle of the nowhere, it's on his property. Well, if you think about it, in the 1880s, when family members passed away, a lot of times they would bury them on their own property.
Right, their own family plot.
Their own family plots, yeah. There's family plots everywhere, especially up here where we live. I've taken you to quite a few family plots. And they're on the old ranches and old farm.
Yeah, their plots are not sarcophagus.
Right. But you got to remember, this gentleman's from Europe.
That's true.
And so in Europe at the time, above ground crypts were popular.
You're right, yeah.
So if you look at cemeteries today and all through in the last 100 years or more, a lot of them have standalone mausoleums for families.
Yeah.
It's basically kind of the same thing.
That's true.
You know, some of them, the caskets are in the walls, and then some of them, caskets, they're in a sarcophagus-like structure on the outside. And so when you look through the door, you can see the above-ground sarcophagus. So this is not an unusual thing. And I've seen quite a few YouTube videos of ghost hunters trying to find this above-ground sarcophagus. And it's like a History Channel show. And what I mean by that is they get you all built up for it, and at the end of the day, they don't find anything.
Right.
You know? And so nobody has found it yet, but there's a high likelihood that it could be out there.
It could, yeah.
You know?
If it hasn't deteriorated.
Well, if it's a stone sarcophagus, it's not going to really deteriorate that quickly, you know? Especially
I
if...
meant more like falling down, falling into itself.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's protected by underbrush and weeds, then the elements aren't going to get to it as easily as if it was out in the open.
And it's probably still protected by the Hound of Hell. But what I want to know...
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to come up with. I don't mean to stop you there, but the black dog in the cemetery, is that the same black dog that was protecting the vampire?
Right. Who knows?
Because that black dog has now also been seen running around Creek Road as well, even today.
Well, I was just wondering if this person, that they say was a vampire, was it Barnabas? And I'm not talking Johnny Depp Barnabas. I'm talking the Dark Shadows show Barnabas.
Well, that happened on the East Coast by Boston, so probably not. California, we have our own vampire. And Barnabas came from England.
He did.
Not Italy or Spain, so highly unlikely. We know too much about that.
We do, yeah.
California has its own vampire. Now, I did call the Ojai Historical Society or Museum and asked them about this legend. And the woman I talked to knew nothing about it. She had never heard of it.
Huh.
Which I found really, really odd.
Yeah.
She suggested that this story must have come from the Bram Stoker's Dracula, which came out in 1887. And so there's a lot of vampire hoopla after that book came out.
Right.
And so she believes that story probably came up from the reading of that book.
Right.
Now, if this legend was occurring before that, then that doesn't hold water. And you're probably thinking, well, if he didn't come up with that book until 7 years later, then how would they think about vampires? Vampires have been around for centuries.
Yeah.
You know, just because Bram Stoker wrote a book on it doesn't mean that was the first time anybody's thought about vampires.
Right. Oh, exactly.
And so I don't think that the book had anything to do with the legend, but that's my personal opinion.
I would have to agree. Yeah. But it's a neat story. I mean, either way. I mean, but if you think about it, if somebody does move to a remote place and weird things are starting to take place, let's blame it on a vampire.
Well, and then the fact that the guy's sleeping in a sarcophagus. That kind of hurts his chances of not being a vampire.
Right.
So, out of all these stories, which ones of them do you think might be true?
I don't know.
Because with all these stories, there's got to be a little bit of truth in the story.
And some of them, yeah. I mean, now I can kind of see maybe a school bus with the children. I can kind of see that happening, unfortunately. The others, I don't know. Sometimes people just like to make up stories and it gets around town and now it becomes a legend.
Right.
You don't know. I mean, we don't have newspaper articles. We don't, so yeah, they are urban legends.
Exactly. The thing that bothers me about the vampire one, we don't have a name.
Yeah, Barnabas.
Now, if they came up with a name,
yeah,
that would make it even more believable.
Right.
Because then you could start looking up the name of this guy. Mm-hmm. You're not going to find where he's buried, obviously, because no one knows. But maybe if you're going to make up that story, come up with a name, do some background on the guy, and to where it's almost believable.
Right.
With anybody that's going to look this guy up, going,
right.
Oh, this guy actually did exist. Oh, wow, he actually came from Spain.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, maybe this story is true.
Exactly, yeah.
So I like the Char Man story, and I think, like I said before, the Char Man story, I'm more believing that it was the guy with skin cancer.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that.
That was walking his dog down the road.
That makes sense.
And then the local youth just basically took that and ran with it.
Right. Well, maybe they just went home and were trying to tell their parents, and they said, what does he look like? And the kids may have said, well, he looks like he'd been burned. And then the adults then go, oh, you mean charred? There you go. And now you have the charred man.
Right, so. Exactly. Well, and, kids can be kids. And I know when I was in Yorba Linda, my cousins always told me about the witch that lived down the street. We point out the house every time we walked by.
I had one in Napa, too. It was a creepy house. And all the kids said that a witch lived there. And I remember I was always scared walking by it because it was just overgrown, just dingy, just as it just looked creepy.
Oh, yeah.
So I get it.
And then we also had another house. I think I've pointed it out to you a few times when I lived in Fullerton on Fern Drive. And it looked like kind of like a castle, had a castle-like look to it.
Uh-huh.
And I know my cousin is going to laugh when she hears this. We always thought there was a witch that lived in there, too. We'd walk by it almost every day or every other day, just going, I don't know.
Yeah,
she gonna come get us or what?
That's how I felt with the little house in Napa. I kept expecting her to come, every time I walked by. So.
Oh yeah. Well, I definitely want to go check out Ojai. There's a lot to do there. There's a lot of local shops, like I said, and a lot of nice eateries with some really cool stuff. And what I also saw was an outdoor bookstore. I'm interested. That intrigues me. And when I'm there, definitely get a bottle of the Char Man hot sauce.
Yeah, you go right on ahead. I'm touching it.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, well, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. What was your favorite haunted story? I think,
or one that you think could be true.
Right. Well, you know what this makes me want to do?
Go ghost hunting.
Well, yeah. While I'm in Ojai, gotta spend the night. You gotta spend the night at the hotel in room 5, number 1, but jump in the car and drive down Creek Road a few times. Get yourself something to drink and drive up and down Creek Road, see if we can find anything. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Like I said, we will see you on the next episode. And I want to thank Cheryl for joining me on these last 6 episodes. It has been a blast. She's not going anywhere. I'm just saying thank you because it makes it a lot easier to do this podcast with somebody else to talk to here and have an interaction.
Sure. No, I love doing it. So yeah. I'll
keep
coming.
Yeah, like I said, I'm learning as I go. So having her here makes it a lot easier and a lot more fun to have this interaction. Mm-hmm. And I have other guests that I have lined up.
Oh, nice.
My cousin Kenny is going to do some episodes with me.
Cool.
And I'm going to talk my cousin Janet next time I see her in Southern California to do a few episodes with me.
Good luck with that. I'm not saying that to be mean, Janet.
I think she'll do it.
No, I think she will too.
I think she will.
And I think she'll have fun.
And then I definitely want to start getting into doing some interviews with some other historical people as well. Have some fun conversations.
Yeah.
So that's it for today. You guys go out, be good humans, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving and an amazing weekend. And we'll see you guys next week.
So instead of saying, oh, hi, it's oh, bye.
Oh, Lord.